have a science advisor.
There's Dr.
Namaste.
Dr. Moskowitz has arrived. Yeah, so he will give us
Thank you.
He's going to bless us with see, we're all doing this because Namaste, because I'll introduce people too, because he doesn't know anybody here. Ankit Kandlawar is actually from New Delhi. As a matter of fact, he's broadcasting from New Delhi. He heads up our IBM TV Health channel, and he showed us doing this so that we change our cultural norms here, the Namaste handshake, because our cultural norms here for the last 200 years, or I don't know how many centuries, frankly, they don't work, and they need to be replaced, as we all know. So we did that. Now, if we can move this aside, we know the Namaste, so we can introduce the other people here. Kim is get rid of that coronavirus so we can introduce people. Kim is actually in the Raleigh-Durham area, and she's with the IBM TV. I'm actually in the Raleigh-Durham area also, and Willie Hill below us is in Australia, mate. He's actually in the Melbourne, Australia. He's does a lot of our startups. Dr. Moskowitz actually has a very impressive CV. I was sitting there trying to read this, and I'm going like, this will take a while because the thing is, he's a medical doctor and he actually does research in the area, but has an extensive CV because he's been doing this for a long time. He's one of those people, I say, which are like the MD PhDs that we've had that actually do the work in the area, as opposed to people who deliver the work in the area, which is a whole different ball game, and has hyper-technical analysis about it, as opposed to a very cursory review of the coronavirus. So because I was reading through some of his literature, and I was going like, oh, this is going to take a while. It's like an ssrn.com page that'll take a while just to decipher, like the hieroglyphics. And since I didn't really do well in my pathology classes when I wasn't in medical school, I have a little bit of a deficient background in the area, but I do find it very interesting, Dr. Moskowitz. Then the minute there was a medical problem in this country, it's headed up by politicians. So rather than it's like
doctors,
no doctors, no let's not
scientists.
Let's not talk to the doctors. Let's not talk to the scientists. Instead, oh, I've got a heart condition. I think I better go see my mirror. I mean, this is I'm going, dude, you're talking to the wrong person. I have asthma. I have respiratory problems. I think I'll see my councilman. I mean, that's kind of like what we do here. It's kind of ridiculous. And what I like to do is I like to talk to the people who know about it. Generally, if you have a medical background, you have a better understanding of medical problems than a politician. That would be my basic thinking. So I did read through some of your literature, and I'm going, this is going to take a while. I can't scan it in fast enough and get the ideas out. But tell us, what are your thoughts about this coronavirus and what's going on in in your field?
Well, I think what's interesting is that there's old school virology, which Fauci represents, which is that the only thing that matters with a virus is the virus. And then there's new school that looks at the host innate immune response to the virus, which in most cases starts with the macrophage, but in this particular case starts with a mast cell. So mast cells are under-recognized, under-respected. They're buried in the tissues. They're very hard to get a look at, really. They don't circulate in the blood. And so they're not studied very much, but the mast cell is probably the most virtuoso of all the immune cells, and can make over 200 mediators, cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha, the ones that cause you to have the fever and the severe fatigue and the aches, the body aches. And they also have eotaxins to call eosinophils into play. They can call macrophages into play, which amplify the immune response. And they basically can cause single-handedly every single symptom and sign of COVID-19. The beauty of this is that there are abundant mast cell drugs around, many of them over the counter. So if people wanted to try to prevent COVID-19, which I think every everybody will have to do. Sooner or later, we're going to have to come out of our caves and rejoin society. And I don't think this virus is going to go away in the summer. I think we're all going to be exposed to it like measles and be inoculated. And I think the 20% who have mast cell hyperactivity because they have food allergies or drug allergies or hives, I think they're going to have to take antihistamines like Allegra or Claritin, or more powerful drugs like Cromolyn or Singulair, Montelukast. And at the first sign of illness, they're going to have to take steroids, Flonase or Nasacort in their nose, and then oral prednisone like we give asthma patients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is, I'm familiar with all that being an asthmatic, so I took Rondec when it first came out, which was billions of years ago. But what do you think about some of the new treatments that are coming out? I think there's this new mRNA 1273 that's being developed, and they have some of these other new treatments that just was announced from the University of Pittsburgh. What do you think about some of these new treatments that are coming out? Well, it looks like there's two different classes. There are treatments and then there are vaccines. So not all of them are vaccines. Some of them are treatments. And the treatments, they look like they actually will just alleviate or reduce your symptoms. But the vaccines, at least purportedly, will eliminate the it's like the smallpox vaccine will actually eliminate that. What are your thoughts about the treatments first? Because right now, all I see is Band-Aids. In other words, let's wear masks, let's wear shields, let's stay away from people. Well, that's the Band-Aid on the whooping, the wound. What about the treatments? What do you see that's going out in the treatments that are out there before we even get to the vaccines?
Well, I'm very impressed by steroids. And there's starting to be reports out of a Spanish hospital. Some of the Chinese patients were treated with steroids. They're very successful. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's not like hydroxychloroquine,
Mm-hmm.
which has not impressed me so far.
Right.
But steroids are the standard way to deal with mast cell hyperactivity. Fortunately, this is not an IgE-mediated response. So you don't need an EpiPen. I mean, you don't die in 4 hours from anaphylaxis from a wasp sting, but it is a slow-moving anaphylaxis. To me, I think steroids should be adequate. I think all other drugs are a waste of time. They're going to take way too long to prove safety, and I think this. If there's a good treatment already, I'm all for repurposing existing drugs. And I know the FDA likes that approach.
Right. Because the thing is, they basically have been tested. They just need to be repositioned in a place that would actually work. What about remdesivir? I think that's the name of the Gilead Science is touting. See, the real problem I have with the pharmaceutical industry, and we're a not-for-profit, not sponsored by them, so we don't have to go like this to the pharmaceutical industry. But the real problem I have when the pharmaceutical industry comes out with something, they start touting it. I mean, that's natural. That's how their stocks are driven up. But what about that? I've been just tracking it. Remdesivir, does that have any application? It's been used before. Gilead Science looks like they're a pretty good group out of Boston. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, Gilead was Rumsfeld's company.
Really?
And I don't think it's an accident that they have pretty much cornered the market on viral disease. During avian flu, I tried testing some of the avian flu people for anti-angiotensin 2 drugs, ARBs, like losartan. And I got a hold of some patients in Vietnam because bird flu patients were rare. And it turns out the Vietnamese doctors wouldn't let anybody use anything other than oseltamivir, Tamiflu. And then there's this unholy connection between WHO, which was gifted 1 million Tamiflu doses, and Gilead. And in fact, I think WHO serves as a kind of a monopolistic vendor for Gilead. I think science is extremely corrupt.
Oh, good.
Wow.
Really? I mean, the thing is, what a surprise. Well, I mean, what the real problems, of course, like I said, from our standpoint, is basically gathering.
I want to go back to this. I think
Yeah, we have to be careful of going in that one. No, let's do some introductions. We can get to that later. We have
a real doctor who said this. This isn't Kim speculating
right
and saying I looked at facts,
Yeah.
but Dr. Moskowitz, one of the things I always talk about in science, because I'm a scientist basically in technology for many, many years, and I always say that whatever we prove today is fact, there's always another science fact tomorrow that's going to disprove it. So that, in some ways, is it corrupt? Maybe, I don't know. But can you just define or explain, elaborate more what you just said? Because I mean, I think the world is, we're sitting on pins and needles right now. And what you said
and the world will focus in now on the scientific community, which we've ignored for the last several decades, including ignoring Bill Gates's TED Talk 5 years ago. Hey, the biggest problem we're going to have is a pandemic. And we ignored it. Who cares about it?
Well, we've been ignoring the scientists for a while. We got late.
So now listen, here's the real deal. ESPN's dead, so now it's going to be the doctor's show. I mean, come on, and we're going to be tracking, rather than the football teams, we're going to be tracking all the coronavirus solutions. And with that, we do have two other doctors who have joined us from India. We have Dr. Rachit Gupta, who's a pain specialist, and we're all in pain now, and Dr. Sagu, who's been on our show a lot of times from also.
Namaste.
Yeah, we've already learned something from India. It was interesting to see Dr. Fossey. We're also going to have Dr. Barb Arnaud. I don't know if you know him, Dr. Moskowitz. He was the NBC medical coordinator for years. He's going to be on our show in about an hour and a half. Just let you know. But if you need to beam in and beam back out, if you want to beam back in at 12:30 EST, he'll be back on it. He'll be on at 12:30 EST.
I want him to finish what he said.
Oh yeah. She's totally into it. We want to know about the efficacy of the what they call it, the scientific community, and how the ethics of the scientific community. Let's talk about that.
Well, so as you said, Nick, I was well trained and was ready to take my place in the power structure, but have been shunted aside for the last 25 plus years because I'm a nephrologist and I worked out a way to prevent dialysis, both from acute and chronic kidney failure.
Right.
So you'd think that people in India, for example, might know about how to prevent dialysis, and think that dialysis would be obsolete now. No way. Nobody in healthcare wants to get rid of dialysis. It's the single most lucrative condition.
Really?
So you asked me about remdesivir. Remdesivir, from the public health point of view, makes no sense. It's intravenous, super expensive, unavailable. So the focus on remdesivir is basically just to drive up its stock price yet again. So what I have been impressed by, when I was a kid in the 50s, polio was solved.
Yeah.
What I've been impressed by in my life is there's an absolute vacuum when it comes to public health. I mean, the most obvious public health things, like getting rid of assault weapons after every mass killing, is just completely ignored. I mean, zero impact on anybody. I mean, on the people, on the voters, it means a lot. But on the politicians, they don't pay attention to us anymore. That's been demonstrated. They only pay attention to the lobbyists. So I consider this COVID-19 story, similarly baffling. This whole idea of quarantine for a peanut allergy makes no sense, because sooner or later people are going to have to come out of their houses and get exposed to the virus. And we've got 1.5 million patients so far. We still don't have a treatment that's effective. I find that extraordinary.
Yeah. Also, Dr. Markowitz, you mentioned a couple things interesting because the Ann Kit, I believe one of his family members has kidney issues, so I'm certainly they would be interested in that. And when you mentioned the guns, Willie, who's from Melbourne, I asked him yesterday about they removed all the guns from Australia. Mate. By the way, when you talk to Australians, you always have to say mate at the end of it. Hey, we moved all the guns away, mate. What happened to the Willie? What happened to the crime with guns? Did mass shootings and shootings go down or up in Australia?
Went down big time. I mean, there was nothing after that. The only other people who had guns were the bikies, like Hell's Angels people.
the bikies. Okay. So the thing is, here's the problem. Okay. So all you have to do is ask the Australian, mate, did it work or did it not work to eliminate the guns in Australia, mate?
It worked. It worked.
Okay. See, the real problem that we have in this country, we're a little bit stubborn. Even if we find something that works, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to implement it, you know? And so here's something that was simple work that worked. And also, I believe in New Zealand, they did shut down, and I understand what you're saying, Dr. Markowitz. Okay, you shut down the people and they all go in their cubby holes. What's plan B? What do we do next? Have you heard about that? What do we do next? What's the next? As all the chess players will be joined by some of them, what's the next move on the chessboard, Dr. Markowitz?
First I have to say that I was in Melbourne in '98. It's a lovely city. And the nephrologists in Melbourne had no interest in eliminating dialysis either. So people are true to type professionally, and I actually couldn't find anywhere on earth where the nephrologists wanted to do the right thing. And what happened was that everybody, and if I approached anybody, it got kicked over to the nephrologists, and the nephrologists all, without really a second thought, decided that it was not the right time to prevent their livelihood. So what was the question, Nick? I'm sorry.
What's the next step? Okay, the thing is, because you pointed something out. Okay, we're not going to be able to stay in our little cubby holes.
I mean, are we going to live like this?
Masks are ridiculous because the virus comes in through the edges.
Unless you know how to make the mask and wear the mask.
You can't it's not airtight at the nose. Mm-hmm. Nor is it airtight.
You make it to yourself, right?
Well, that's expensive. I mean, most people can't get it. And, I'm not sure that
artist mask. This is so you won't get dust and certain chemicals from the art world. So yeah, it's expensive. But yeah, I mean, but is that where we're heading, or are there? I believe in building the immunity. That we have Dr. Sagu. He's been teaching us that every day. He's been coming on almost, and he's starting his own show on helping us build our immunity, because I think that's where we need to go.
Well, I would disagree. I would I would knock down our immunity. We're starting a global trial to use mast cell inhibitors, and then if you still get symptoms, to graduate to nasal steroids and then oral prednisone for a 2-week course.
So you're talking about the steroid applications if you get sick, right?
Well, to prevent antihistamines, Allegra and Claritin.
Right.
I mean, over-the-counter stuff.
So will this help prevent the COVID, or will this just help prevent the symptoms from the COVID?
It's the same thing. I mean, you die of the symptoms. You die of anaphylaxis.
Right.
You're not dying because the virus is replicating in your body and turning it into, tissue paper or toilet paper. I mean, you're dying because your body is reacting so strongly against this virus that it's going nuts. Your innate immune responses, your mast cells are going nuts.
While I have you on, because this is great to have a doctor that really understands this, what is, or if any, the permanent damage after having COVID go in your body if you survive it, if you come back and get it out? and now you have maybe an immunity against that particular COVID. But is there permanent damage?
Well, I mean, if you treat it early with immunosuppressants like steroids,
Okay.
apparently transplant patients, kidney transplant patients are getting this stuff. So the usual immunosuppression that they're on, like tacrolimus, is not good enough, cyclosporin. And they get taken off their immunosuppression and put on steroids, and that resolves the COVID symptoms.
Wow.
So it really looks like steroids, but we know about steroids. I mean, allergists use steroids all the time, right?
I use them sometimes for a spinal problem I have. So,
Right.
Steroids are, I won't say a cure, almost like a Band-Aid. It gets me past that certain point so I can get rehabilitated back to where I need to be. But it does cut the inflammation down enough, and inflammation is what causes us the biggest problems.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So, I mean, you've got a point there. I don't know that I've ever heard a talk on using steroids and the standard basic everyday practices for when you have a sinus infection.
Right.
Why aren't we having these talks? I mean, I don't see it in the media anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
It's not what they're trying to promote. They're trying to promote that
hydroxychloroquine, yeah. But what about prednisone? Since you didn't mention that, would you use prednisone as a prophylactic?
Yeah, because it's standard for asthmatics.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, I have bottles of it, but see, my doctors go, "No, you're not supposed to take that." One of them was neurotic and said, "Hey, keep it away." But I stacked them up, so I've got like stacks of prednisone. But my question is, could prednisone, is it to be used as